Welcome to the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Pluff. Each week, we will cover various topics that dads struggle with in their fitness journey. I'll give you actionable steps that you can apply right away, not only to take back control of your own health, but so you're able to be a better example for your kids too. All right, welcome into this week's episode of the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. This week, we have Derek Stark with us. Derek has a program called The Better Man. He works with dads specifically in their health and fitness. I'm going to let him introduce himself, and then we'll get rolling.
Awesome. Thanks for the introduction, Anthony. My name is Derek Stark, as you mentioned. I've been in the health and fitness industry for almost 10 years. And so it's a huge passion of mine since the beginning, since I was a teenager, playing all sports, and then eventually growing through my coaching experience and qualifications to building a program to help men, help fathers with their health and fitness. And as you said, the program is called the Better Man Program. And so helping men really with four key pillars: training, nutrition, lifestyle, and mindset coaching. It's a passion of mine, and I love what I do every single day.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you could make it on the show here. Right off the bat there, you mentioned how you used to be an athlete, training, putting yourself through, all the workouts and everything. How did you kind of transition from one, being an athlete to being a dad and then working with others? How has kind of your own background kind of affected the way you train other people?
I think overall, is as you begin to develop in this industry, and then you resonate with individuals that you want to help, you get to understand the challenges that they have. And so often my father, my dad, I looked up to because I'm one of three children. So I had four children, and then having a really well-paid job, a good career, but also taking care of his health and providing for the family. So overall, I began to grow passionate about helping men succeed in these areas. So providing, taking care of life's most important things: work, family, and health.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, starting out, it was pretty much, just working in various construction jobs while I was going to the gym. And then I began to get, getting jacked, getting lean, and just enjoying, training, and then developing into running marathons, long distance cycling, doing a David Goggins challenge, for example,
Nice.
Stuff like that really saw okay, well, this is something that I can actually make money from, that I can help people and serve people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love it every day. And that's pretty much who I help, is men really take care of what's most important in life.
Awesome. You mentioned David Goggins there. I'm a huge fan of of David Goggins. Was that the 4x48 challenge?
Yeah, it was terrible, horrendous. But I would say it's much more of a mental challenge than physical.
Yeah.
And so I arguably learned much more about myself during that challenge than anything else I've done in my life. And so that kind of got me into mindset coaching, really learning how to control and callous my mind to do what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so it's been amazing. It's an amazing journey. And now I kind of pass on the teachings that I've learned from experience to my clients. And I'm still working on it with the goal to do an Ironman probably next year. So yeah, awesome. It's you dabble your foot in, and then you're like, okay, I like this. And then you just keep, just trying out different things.
Right. Yeah. David Goggins was one of the reasons I really started to commit to kind of being a morning person, getting up really early. There are a couple of people who had a big influence, but he was definitely one of them. When his book Can't Hurt Me came out, and then his most recent one, Never Finished, I've listened to both of them multiple times. They're both really good reads, but I think that plays a lot into being a dad, right? Because a lot of times you're going to be doing hard things. You're going to be doing things that you're not necessarily prepared for, right? When you become a dad, no matter how many books you read beforehand, you don't really know what you're doing, right? It's you just kind of get thrown in, and you're never really prepared. And then you're trying to take care of your kids, you're trying to be a good husband, you're trying to be a good spouse, you're trying to do all these things, and your priorities really kind of shift a little bit, and taking care of your health is something that isn't something that is at the top of a lot of people's list. And so how do you kind of work with your clients to, kind of, one, let them know like it's okay to take care of yourself, but two, actually make time to do it.
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest things that I coach on. You've got training, nutrition, and habits and other components, but really, if you're not making time for yourself for these things, it starts with making the time, right? So often it is, I work with kind of high level individuals that are, directors or CEOs. And so the biggest
Mhm.
thing is like time is everything. So putting themselves first, being a little bit selfish, like, if you wake up 5 a.m. club, get your workout in, prepare your meals, but giving at least 1 hour of the first part of your day to yourself
Mhm.
is going to be crucial so you can show up. So the large part of a coach on is scheduling, effectively what I like to call winning the week formula. So how can you schedule your week to focus on, like I said, life's most important things, work, family, and health. Um, and really making time for it along with your work schedule, your meetings, your personal things, and picking the kids up from school.
Mhm.
So yeah, winning the week formula, setting the schedule, committing to it, setting non-negotiables, and really just focusing on daily actions, the daily actions becoming to weekly, and weekly becomes monthly, and so on. So that's the process that I would take my clients through in the beginning. Like,
Mhm.
this is your schedule. I want you to set it. I want you to commit to it. And then over being consistent over 3, 4, 5 months, results will showing.
Right. Yeah, I think, the small daily things, it's we have these big goals looking 3, 4 months down the road, like you said there, but it's what you're doing each day that's going to get you there. Now, you talked about kind of, the fitness there, like getting up early, making sure, you're prepared, you're winning the day, you're winning the week there. Where does nutrition get thrown into this? And so, like, I know for me, a lot of my clients, like, they don't really like to meal prep, right? They sometimes they get really tired. I've always said, like, you don't have to eat the same thing every day, but if you can cycle through like 3, 4, 5 meals, because then you don't even have to once you track it for a while, you kind of get, what's in it. You don't have to track it anymore, because you kind of get this picture, right? So how do you work with them? You said you're working with CEOs, other business leaders, and things like that. They're working 60 hours a week, right? Maybe more. And then by the time they get home, they're having dinner, they're doing all these things. How do you kind of help them make time, or what's your strategy nutrition wise for them?
So yeah, I would say it's unique to each individual. I do have common, techniques or a blueprint that I would use for the men. Some work, for some of them, some don't. So really, a simple approach I would use is we typically eat the same meals every day. We like the same kind of proteins, the vegetables and fruits and so on. It's just, yeah, really just getting the food shopping in, and just really, having like your 5 or 6 traditional meals that you would have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner,
Mhm.
and just, recycling them like you mentioned. So that's one way I would do it. I do have my clients come in and they track for a minimum 4 to 6 weeks.
Mhm.
From the beginning, they track, they understand.
Yeah.
Then after that, okay, now much more than a lot of nutritionists would know because they don't really get into people's lives and understand
Right.
what it means to lose weight or what you need to focus on with macros. So after that 4 6 week period, yeah, just sticking to your list of template meals and recycling those. I use some other approaches, which would be like the 1 2 3 rule. So that would be in a day you would follow these 3 steps. So one would be one large salad per day. Two
Okay.
would be 2 protein sources, minimum 40 to 50 grams.
Gotcha.
And then number three would be 3 large bottles of water. So for guys that are busy, meetings, CEO, dealing with a team, like a lot of things, I would say for some of those guys following the 1 2 3 rule and they want to lose 30 to 60 pounds, then that's going to be great for them. And if they're doing that, consistently for a period of time, they've all lose the weight. So I tend to try and find what's best for each individual, but these are some common things that I would, one, educate the client from tracking 4 to 6 weeks, and then finding out what's going to work best for them going forward.
Yeah, I think, those, I think when people start to track, they kind of get in their head, like, I have to do this forever. I don't want to do this, for the rest of my life. And like, for me, I've been tracking for years. And so it's not that big a deal. Right. And like I said, for me, I circle or kind of cycle through a few meals. So it makes it really easy, right? Especially if you're putting it in an app, because you can just add what you had yesterday or last week or something like that. But, tracking for 4 to 6 weeks, like you said there, like that I think that's a skill that most people should probably learn at some time, because it really gives you an idea. Like it helps with portion control. It helps with, I'm not getting enough protein in. This is how I can do it, right? And like doing, I know a lot of coaches who only have people track for like 3 days the first week or something. I think that's very valuable, but typically when you first start tracking, you're going to eat a little bit better than you normally would, because somebody's checking in on you, right? And so, but I really like how you said 4 to 6 weeks there, because that makes it really hard to kind of cheat the system, right? If you're being accurate and you're being honest with what you're actually eating there, then that information, it's going to be valuable for the rest of your life, because then you realize, like, I'm eating the right amount of calories, but I'm not eating nearly enough protein, right? Or what could I add? I always kind of like to do the approach where I like to add things to people's meals before I take them away, because if we have our calories accounted for, and we're adding protein, we're adding fruits and vegetables, we're adding all these other things to the meal, and our calories are accounted for, well, then naturally some of those other things are gonna be less. And so I don't know with your clients, but what would you say like their biggest struggle is, overall, kind of nutrition wise? It like a lot, I know a lot of times, like, one, tracking is really hard, obviously. But two, like, a lot of people don't eat nearly as much protein as they probably should. So what would you say are kind of what's your clientele's kind of biggest struggles there?
Yeah, specifically with nutrition, I would say the protein is probably the biggest part. I get on the call with these guys and find out how much they're eating and things like that. And traditionally they're like, 80 or 60 grams protein, right? Which is nowhere near enough, especially for men that want to build muscle, drop body fat. So protein's a big one. And then, when you say, okay, I want you to eat 130 grams, 150 grams, 60
Yeah.
grams protein, they're like, wow, but like if you break it down into your main meals, it really isn't that difficult. Like,
Right.
say 40 grams protein in your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, there's 120 grams. And
Right.
then, I don't know, protein shake, you'd be close to 150. So really, it's just like protein is the biggest part. I think overall, like that plus the meal prep. So they're often just going for convenience food. They're easily influenced with the social network or their colleagues, business meetings, business lunch. And so with that being said, it's like, look at your closest 5 friends,
Mhm.
right? And there's a quote that says that you're the average of the 5 people you spend most of the time with, right?
Yeah.
And it's so true. Like, I walk around here in Mexico City and I see people that are a little bit larger than they should be or carry more weight, and then I look at their friends that they're with and they're all overweight. So
Yeah.
there's a lot to be said for that. But yeah, I think overall would be convenience, influence, protein. Yeah, that's the main ones.
Yeah, yeah, I think what you said there, kind of goes not only for like nutrition too, but um, for your exercise, for your fitness, and I think that's why a lot of people probably struggle to stick to something long term, right? When you're wanting to make a change, when you're starting to eat a little bit better, when you're starting to exercise, but your wife isn't, and your friends aren't, and you're the only one, right? Eventually, you start to kind of fall back to the mean there, right? And so I think one, that's the value of hiring a coach, because you're adding somebody into your circle there. You're adding somebody into your life there. But um when you were mentioning earlier about mindset, okay, so I think mindset is, uh, over the past probably most recently couple years, but 5-10 years, this has been a really big topic, right? There's lots more studies, there's lots more, a ton more books on it. You can find, you can read books for years and never get them all. There's so many now. But um how do you kind of work with clients on their mindset around food? I know the mindset, nutrition, obviously, or not nutrition, on exercise is one thing, but how do you kind of work with them on just kind of being more open-minded to doing things that they've never done? They've lived their life one way for 30 plus years, or however old they are when they come to you. So how do you kind of work with them on their mindset just regarding nutrition?
Yeah. So, and the mindset is a huge component. A lot of the guys that I start working with are 30 to 60 pounds overweight. And so with the nutrition component, with mindset, it's really looking at a situation and thinking, if I have this food, or I have a cheeseburger or pizza or a beer, is this going to take me closer to my goal, or is it going to take me further away? So the mindset is just changing the way you look at things, and always thinking about how you can eat foods that's going to truly serve you, that's going to fuel you for fat loss. When it comes to social events, like, there's a lot of coaches out there that would maybe say they would deem these foods as bad, like pizza or burger or having alcohol.
Yeah.
For me, it's not inherently bad. It's more like um you need to make sure that you put in the work so you can have the reward,
Mhm.
right? But not in excess that would mean that you would be going over your calories and things like that. But for example, for nutrition or socializing, going on a night out would be like, well, yeah, it's good to socialize. Usually you might have 5 or 6 beers, but what about if we just change that to like a vodka lemonade or
Yeah, yeah.
vodka soda, stuff like that? So the mindset of just making educated decisions, food swaps, instead of having, I don't know, Ben and Jerry's, you can have Froyo, like small things like that. So the mindset is like, just enjoy life. Don't feel like you have to be restricted, cut everything out. Look at, well, I educate them really on these things like food swaps when it comes to the most common things like alcohol or treats or snacks or things like that. But the mindset one is it serving you? Is it not? If it's not, then let's look at an alternative, a better option, and
Mhm.
start to factor that in, because you probably read Atomic Habits, right? And it
Yeah.
speaks about
Yep.
small changes done consistently equate to big results. So that's effectively, if you do those small changes, you can easily lose 10 to 20 pounds, right? So that's the mindset that I try and coach or educate the clients on when it comes to nutrition.
Awesome. Yeah, I think some of those small changes really get overlooked too. I had a client lose a significant amount of weight, and the big change they did was just switch from like regular soda to diet. Like they kind of, in their mind, they knew that they weren't quite ready to give up soda completely. So how can we take one step there, right? And so they switched from regular to diet, and it doesn't seem like a big change there, but when a soda has 150 calories or something, and you're drinking 3 or 4 of those a day, that adds up. That's 600 calories right there. You're changing there. And so, like, obviously, there are, I, my wife and I try and teach our kids, like, some foods are like more nutritious, some are less, right? And so we call them sometimes foods with our kids. Because, just like you said, like, are these helping me get to where I want to? It doesn't mean you can't have them. Doesn't mean you can't have them, but is there something else I could eat right now, or something, a different action I could take that's going to help me get there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, like, the two macronutrients, or the two things I always kind of look at, is one, calories, and two, protein. Um, I don't have clients track carbs and fat. I kind of take it as personal preference. Um, some coaches obviously different. Maybe you've different thing coach differently than I do. But if people can hit their calories and you can hit your protein, everything else tends to kind of head in the right direction there. And so, food swaps, that's, I've always gone back and forth on that, right? There are some things that was like, I would buy like, like a off-brand, more nutritious version protein ice cream, but then I would end up like hating it. It didn't taste very good to me and stuff. And so like, I would end up going back always. And so like, how do you work with clients who, don't necessarily like some of the like fruits and vegetables just tends to be, or especially vegetables tends to be something like a lot of people just don't like, if you didn't start eating when you were younger, there's a lot of adults who still don't like vegetables. So how do you kind of, one, work with their mindset, but two, introduce new things and have them be a little bit more open to trying different foods?
Yeah, to be honest, I've not had a great struggle when it comes to those kind of things, like introducing new foods or trying new things that maybe they've never ate in their life. But a lot of the guys that I get them to, they juice, right? So they'll create juice, like a fruit juice or something like that. I do advise them to try and stick to at least just 2 fruits, okay, instead of putting in like 6 different fruits, right?
Yeah.
Probably not great, but so I do that. But overall, like the guys that I coach are generally, they're already eating okay, like in terms of like, wholesome natural foods. These processed, that would be maybe 60-40 or 50-50, right? So when you come in and you change it to 80-20, then the results, like they show easily. I've never really had a struggle with that, to be honest, when it comes to giving people new foods to eat.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, my big thing is always like, I don't like to necessarily tell you what to eat, right? Like like my food preferences are going to be different than yours, right? And so it's like things that for me, like I could eat like a ribeye every single day. Some people don't like that, right? And so like for me, it's easy to kind of get protein in like for lunch if I'm eating like steak or something like that, but not everybody likes that, right? Like I can only eat chicken for a couple of days in a row, and then I'm ready for something else. And so I never try and tell clients like what to eat, just kind of how to incorporate some of these, find different protein sources, find different fruits and vegetables that you like, right? And then just kind of cycle through those there.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. I think we're on the same boat when it comes to that. Is like, you stick to the foods that you like. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. For me, I this year I began to eat a lot of more organ meat, and so liver, kidneys, and heart, and
Nice.
it's that's my thing. I like it. For a lot of people, they're like, that's disgusting, but for me,
Yeah.
I feel great and I love it. And so whatever way you can get the protein in, or really just nutrient dense food, then go for it.
Awesome. So I want to go back to when you were talking about kind of your the workout program with your clients there. Do you have a specific, like, do you kind of start off, most clients, like obviously it's probably individualized depending on like their schedule and everything, but is there like a certain number of days you kind of recommend to your clients, or is it really just kind of what fits in at the beginning?
Yeah, in the beginning, we set expectations, and so I like to get men that come into the program. They know what they're expected to do, and so we ask for a minimum of 3 hours per week when it comes to training. So 3 sessions in the gym. Traditionally, I like to start. Some of these guys are beginner, intermediate, but to get them to start in the gym would be simply just using the machines for the first 4 weeks, right? Maybe they've not been going to the gym for the last year or 6 months, but machine work would be where I would start, 4 weeks, and then progressing into more advanced exercises, using more free weights. But generally 3 sessions per week is my blueprint, because the mindset is that you go to the gym to get stronger. You're not going there to lose weight. You're not,
Right.
It's not a fat loss tool in the way that I coach, but your fat loss tool is the nutrition and being active and walking, sleeping well. So effectively that's everything that I push. I actually repeat every week or every second week, like You're going to the gym to get stronger,
Right.
lift your weights, progress, or add volume, add more reps, add more sets, slow down the movement. So all of these kind of things that just get stronger, right? A lot of these guys, they get into their 40s and they've always been overweight. They've never, since being a teenager, they've never been like skinny or lean or stuff like that. So it does take a lot of more time for those men to get into the routine, but also to build muscle and drop body fat simultaneously. So yeah, in the early stages, basic three sessions per week, full body workouts, hitting the machines, and then progressing each and every single week.
Awesome. Yeah, I really love what you said there about, like kind of starting them off with the machines at the gym there. They're like there's this big debate, are machines or free weights better and all this stuff. And it's like I think there's room for both. I think there's a spot for both. The guys who train at Westside Barbell use machines. If it's good enough for them, like then it's probably good enough for the rest of us, right? But I had a client once who never wanted to work out unless they use machines, and that really kind of changed my perception of it at first when I was a young trainer, when I first started out, because in my mind, dumbbells, things like that were better. You're controlling the movement, you're getting more out of it and stuff. But they were going to the gym 3 days a week when they use machines. They were going maybe once every other week if I had them use dumbbell, because they just didn't like it. And so they weren't, maybe they just weren't confident at the beginning, without somebody being there and stuff. And so I think machines are fantastic. There's obviously, we could sit here and debate all day long, the benefits of them or which one is better. But I think as long as you're doing something, that I think that's the most important thing. You can always improve or add on advanced exercises later on, but I think machines are something that are probably underutilized, and you can get a lot done, and a very short amount of time, because you're not having to switch out weights. It's just a pin on the weight stack there. And so I think for me personally, I love when clients ask to use machines or they have them available to them, because it gives them more options too. And I think sometimes, like, obviously, like, we know, like, in order to get really good at something, you kind of have to do the same things over and over again, right? But machines, though, like, you can continue to progress. And I found as well that people don't get quite as bored with them. Maybe they're not as fatiguing. There's less mental strain on them than having to do these other things. But I like to hear that. I like to hear kind of you seem very open-minded when it comes to, like, your clients, how you're starting there, and then kind of fitting into with what goes with their schedule.
Yeah, it's important to understand your clients, and also it might be a confidence thing, like they're not confident using the free weights.
Right.
Technique is important, so just give them 4 weeks of building some muscle and getting stronger and being more comfortable. But yeah, traditionally it would be, for me, when it comes to strength or gaining muscle, just overall, like, compound movements would be, that's the large part of the bulk of my training for years has been really focusing on compound movements. So that would be a general transition into the second phase. We would be taking out some machines and adding some more compound movements. It might just be with a dumbbell or a kettlebell, like squats or deadlifts. But really, it's just taking someone from intermediate beginner all the way through to try and get them to a place that they want to be, not necessarily where I want them to be.
Right.
Because often it could be a lot of trainers like to coach their clients how they like to train and not how the client likes to train. So I think that's important as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's, I think that was a trap that I kind of fell into, especially when I first started training there. Like, this is what's working for me, right? And so I'm going to give this to clients too. And unfortunately, we're all, we're all very so unfortunately or fortunately, no matter kind of depending on how you look at it there, we're all very different, and like what works for me doesn't necessarily work for you. And so I think it is really important to, find a coach who is going to listen to, and that's exactly what you're doing with your clients, right? You're finding what works best for them, not what worked best for you, not what worked best for your other clients. You're finding, their situation, kind of assessing where they're at, and kind of, how to get them where they want to go based on, their own experience, their equipment availability, and all those factors.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's important. It often gets overlooked. So being um, being flexible with your clients. I think when you're teaching a certain type of individual, if it's men, fathers, they've got a lot of things going on.
Mhm.
So is it really wise to give someone like that a really regiment and strict program? You need to train like this, you need to eat like this.
Yeah.
Probably not. Their compliance will be low. So I think overall, just like you said earlier on, is like if they're doing something, then that's better than not at all. So
Right.
yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah. And so the last thing I really want to, and we touched on it a little bit already, but I'm really interested in kind of how you teach your clients, kind of you focus on mindset. And so um, I know for me, like I do check-in calls with my clients every couple of weeks and stuff, and that's really kind of where, one, I think it really helps kind of when you get to know your clients, like the better you get to know them, it's easier to kind of push them a little harder, right? If you're asking someone to do something and they don't know you, um, adherence to that is probably going to be pretty low. Do you use like, so what do you have like a course that you do with them, or so how do you kind of, I'll let you kind of go on that. How do you kind of cultivate their mindset?
Yeah, so before someone joins the program is really setting them up for success. So I have built out an onboarding training that takes someone through all of the key pillars that we mentioned: training, nutrition, lifestyle, mindset. But one of the biggest components is changing your identity. So like if someone comes in their corporate office worker, 60 pounds overweight, he shows up in the world the way he does every day, like how he perceives himself. And so it's taking someone through a journey of changing their habits, their identity, their actions and thoughts. That's all like pre-built before someone joins the program. So there is a bit of work from the clients before they join. When it comes to being in the program itself, is like, so they have learned a bunch of stuff before joining the program, but then it's going through really the weekly check-ins. One, we would have simply just a video feedback, and then other weeks we would have like a one-on-one session or even group calls. So again, it's all, for me, it's bringing together all of these men that are struggling, and they can share and resonate with each other, areas that they struggle, areas that they do well. So it's more like building a support network that they feel comfortable to share.
Yeah.
And then outside of that is like, we have usually a sequence of books that we would have our clients to read. So the first book that I get my clients to read is Atomic Habits,
Nice.
right? So they read that, and then there'll be another sequence of books. Like generally, we like to go for one per month. So again, it's just really personal development, constantly stimulating the mind, constantly learning, taking in new information, but applying it. That's the biggest thing, is being applicable to what we're taking on board. So that's, and then really, like you said, it's just being consistent with all of those things, and providing the follow-up, providing the accountability to making sure that they actually follow through with these things. Because a lot of people, they can go to these most amazing motivational speakers like Tony Robbins, and they can sit and listen about how to change your life and what to do with your business and how to grow and be successful. But there's, less than 5% that will actually take away what he said and apply it and actually get to where they want to be. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Effectively, is the mindset coaching part, is setting up for success, having consistent coaching through the program, personal development, one-on-one calls. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that. Going to like live events. I think especially like obviously we both are training online and things like that. And so like it is a lot different sometimes when you go to a live event, you know, you kind of feel like on fire, right? And that lasts for a while and stuff. And so how can you replicate that? You know, you're doing the check-in calls, just like you said there. And I think trying to make it as personal as possible. And you mentioned Atomic Habits there, you know, doing these small things. Atomic Habits is a great one. I like Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg.
Mhm.
He's a he was a Stanford professor, wrote a book that one's really good too. And then like the compound by Darren Hardy. And so like those three there, like I think, you know, if you can actually implement them, and that, I think that's what you're saying there too, is like learning about it is one thing, right? Implementing it and actually kind of doing those things, doing those small changes every day is really what is going to make those kind of those lasting effects there. You mentioned kind of you kind of have them go through a course there, right? You go through a course there. One thing that I did with my clients is I have them fill out kind of like their vision of like where they see themselves a year from now, and and I don't know, maybe you do something similar, but when your clients are struggling, and you know they can only see where they are right now, they're not, you know, they who they want to be, you know, like when you start a new program, you hire a coach, you go to a live event like you said or something like that, you feel great for a while, right? You get so excited, but eventually that fades, creating like your future self, creating your 2.0 version where you want to be, eventually kind of that feeling is going to fade a little bit. How do you kind of re-engage them to kind of, you know, pull them towards who they want to be and not just focus kind of like how far they have to come?
Yeah, I think a large thing is like you mentioned, you know, on the onboarding is that they would put together their vision,
Mhm.
right? So who they want to be, also identity, so who they are today and who they want to be in the future, and what kind of actions and traits does that new version of yourself have. So a large part of that is, you know, reminding them of when they first enrolled, that they said XYZ, you know, I want to be toned, lean. I want to be able to take my t-shirt off at the beach and, you know, be confident. So just getting them back to like, if it is a goal, okay, like to lose 30 pounds and be lean, well, let's make it more specific to if it is for an event or it's for like you're in Florida and you go to the beach a lot, like to be able to be confident in where you want to be. So it's a constant reminder and process. But I think overall, like when there is clients that maybe go through a phase where maybe they hit a plateau or they're not progressing or they get demotivated, is just getting them to go back to the basics. Because quite often is that if someone is stopped losing weight or they're not progressing the way they should be, is there's often some small things that they were doing in the beginning that they're no longer doing.
Right.
Um, and there's a famous quote, I think it's maybe you'll know better than me. John Wooden, I think it's John Wooden,
Okay.
basketball coach.
Yeah. Yeah.
He said, champions are brilliant at the basics, right? So your LeBron James and Kobe Bryant is, we just need to get brilliant at the basics. So
Yeah.
quite often, like some, you know, you've set the foundation and you start to master the basics of training, nutrition, and some habits, but then, you know, life happens, right? Whatever happens in life, like you can get veered off in a different direction. So then it's just kind of evaluating where that individual is and taking them back to where they should be and focusing on the basics.
Awesome. Yeah. You know, I think, you know, when we look at, you know, maybe we have a fitness influencer or somebody we look up to, we think they're doing something special. You know, what kind of exercises are they doing? You know, what kind of special willpower do they have that allows them to do this? And it's really, they just got really good at the basics, and they are really good. Um, I, I used to always kind of say like those who can like handle boredom the longest, because sometimes, you know, you're doing like a squat, a deadlift, or some whatever exercise you're doing. In order to get really good at it, it might get boring every once in a while, right? But if you can, kind of push through that, if you can kind of push through kind of, tracking your food, eating through some of these things, and a lot of that, I mean, that's a probably another topic for another day, but we live in a very like fast-paced society. And so we're expecting immediate results. And it's like clients who lose, a half pound a week. Well, it doesn't seem like much, right? But 2 pounds a month, right? We do that to a year, it's 20, 25 pounds, right? And so it's like we get so caught up in kind of the here and now. And I think that's really cool. Like you spend so much time working on their mindset to kind of make sure, like, once they develop those habits, once they get to where they want to be, they can stay there. They don't, you mentioned like somebody who is overweight, they're an overweight CEO or something like that. That's how they identify every single day. And the problem, like, most people kind of know, for the most part, what to do as far as weight loss goes. Most people struggle, like, once they get there, now what? How do I maintain this? How do I, because it's new, you're a new person, you're changing your identity. And so I think that's really cool that you spend so much time focusing on that.
Yeah, it's important. And just the last thing that you touched on there, like 6 to 8% of Americans say that they need accountability to get results. So
Yeah.
going back to like a lot of men or individuals, they know what to do to lose weight, just changing nutrition and working out and being consistent and water, sleep. There's so much information out there. You can search on Google, you can get a training program, you can get a nutrition program. Might not be unique and specific for you, but it's definitely a good start that you probably could lose some weight if you're overweight. But where people fail is the accountability. And so
Right.
they need a coach, they need a community, they need someone that's going to give them accountability to stick to the goal.
Right. Awesome. Well, Derek, I appreciate you coming on the show today. You kind of told us about your program there, the Better Man. I want to give everybody an opportunity to find you. Do you have a website for your program, or where's the best place for people to find you online?
Yeah. So online would be LinkedIn,
Okay.
Instagram, and also my website. They're all Coach Stark. So
Okay.
on Instagram at Coach Stark, and same with my website, Coach Stark, as well. So yeah, more than happy to connect with you. And also thanks for the discussion. It was great to have a discussion about these important things in life, and a coach that's also similar to myself in terms of the way that we coach and help men.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. It was great to have you on. I learned a lot from you as well, so I know the audience did. I will get all the links to all your social media and everything, and I will put that in the show notes so they can find you. But I really appreciate you coming on the show today. We'll have to have you on again sometime.
Awesome, Anthony. Thanks for your time, man. Take
All right,
care.
all right. Thank you so much. That concludes this episode of the Fatherhood Fitness Podcast. Thank you for those of you who took time out of your busy schedules to listen. If you have any questions or comments or an idea for a topic for a future episode, please feel free to reach out, and I'd love to hear from you.